Live from New York, it's Thai massage. So we're going to do a brief demonstration on the topics and techniques that we began this morning, addressing specifically the hips. And this will be a helpful resource for you when you're back at home. So we'll begin by simply taking a moment to tune in. And the way that I do this for myself is usually I just open my eyes, see the breath of my partner, and try to synchronize my breath with his breath. And as I do this, what I'm also doing, if we draw some inspiration from that last talk that we heard, it's like me dissolving the boundary that separates me from my receiver and my receiver from me, and through the energy of our breath, we start to step into a rhythm together. I'm going to warm my palms up and bring that rhythm into my hands. So I offer the warmth of my hands and the firmness of my body weight. I use the heel of my hands in the arch of the foot, and I make contact. This first contact is simple. It's just an invitation. And then following the breath, I'm going to start leaning from one side to the other and begin to create a rhythm that will be like a metronome, that will keep me coming back to my intention, which is really to listen. It's to repeat these techniques in an even rhythm and pay attention to what I notice. Palming along the arches of the feet is a nice way to open the soles of the feet and initiate a sequence. Is that okay? A little tender on the knee? Okay. All right, so I'll begin working on one leg. I'm going to lift Mendel's foot and just support underneath his knee, give it a gentle bend, and then I'll use my thighs to support his leg. So I have his knee approximately between my knees, and I use my hand on his knee to create a little bit of a rhythm. And as I do, I'm going to begin palming along the inside line here. So we're working from the inner knee with the heel of the hand, palming all the way towards the top of the hip. So it's the hip bone, the protrusion that sticks out that we know as the ASIS here. And I take the center of my palm and I place it right on the ASIS, and I allow the heel of my hand to nest into the soft spot just inside. And then as I keep the rhythm going with my right hand, I'm noticing and feeling how the ligaments underneath my hand, how they change, how the muscle tissue moves. And then if I change the movement from a pressing out to a drawing in, I use my finger pads on the outer knee, then it shortens the muscle and I can actually sink a little bit deeper with the heel of my hand. And I can continue this palpation with the heel of my hand towards the stomach. And I'm also appreciating how receptive his belly is. If he has tension here, I just wait. I'm patiently waiting for the invitation, just knocking on the door. So one of the great things about these rocking techniques, when you have the rocking, it helps to relax the body. It promotes a release of tension, a letting go. And then my left hand here is actually more like a mother hand, what we would call in shiatsu a mother hand, which is listening. It's the listening hand. So that's a lot of fun, isn't it? Then we're going to shift directions. I'm going to place the sole of his foot in the crook of my hip, and then using my right foot, I place my foot flat on the ground and use my right hand outside his knee. I come into a half kneeling position. Very simple transition. I keep my stance nice and wide. I might even move my stance away from his body so that I can actually get a good opening here through the hip, kind of like happy baby. And I'm going to use both of my hands and fix his thigh to the floor. So I can see there's a little bit of resistance. I'm just going to use a flat palm like a blade come into the hip crease here, and I'm just going to create a little bit of space where things tend to get bound up. And I'm just using my hand like a spacer. And then in order to bring his thigh down, I'm just going to move slowly. Is that okay? Good. So once the thigh is rooted, like a cat, more like a big mama tiger, big paws, large touch, I begin to palm along the hamstring. So while it looks like we're working on the inner thigh, we're actually working on the underside of the leg here. And I'm using really clear body mechanics to pour my weight through straight arms. And for Mendel, since he's got strong legs, I'm not shy about pouring my body weight. So I'm really giving him my body weight and using the heel of my hand, the chubby part of my palm, to pour the weight and work along primarily the hamstring. So I can feel the hamstring tendon running from behind the knee to the attachment at the pelvis. Good. So we're happy here. I can reach with my left hand for the opposite hip. And here I can actually lean and bring his body weight towards where I'm opening his leg and hip. And what that's doing is it's helping to relax the muscle here, so I can sink through my right hand as I lean away from his body and bring his hip for the ride, like so. And that can be really nice to support someone who is resisting bringing their leg to the ground. So if they have their leg up and you go to push and they push back, reach for the opposite hip, come along, and then fix the leg down and palm. Okay? So I'll hold the hip, release his foot, bring him to what we call the palm tree. Palm tree because we often palm, tree because it's like tree pose in yoga. So we're going to use this for a blood stop. If there's the need for support, if the knee is high up like this, you would want to grab a blanket, roll it up, and wedge it like a booster seat underneath the knee, like so. Okay, in Mendel's case, he's fine here without any bolster. He's a big boy. So to come into the position, I have my right foot still forward, like half kneeling. I take my left hand across, and I do this sort of like a breakdancing move. Stretch my left leg through, and I'm going to sit right close to the groin, close to the inguinal crease, and rest the flesh of my butt just on top of what we would call the adductor and where the femoral artery runs to create a blood stop. And so I'm sinking slowly adding body weight. I'm noticing whether there's any resistance. And now that I feel I'm almost 100% of my body weight, I can feel the blood pulse. And I just keep relaxing, 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 relaxing. Until finally, I can release all of my weight into my seat. And as I do that, I can feel the heartbeat. Let's make sure we're getting this all perfect. 8 minutes in. To come out, I'm going to use this far hand for support. So a lot of leverage on this arm. I use my hand on my knee, and I slowly lift up, as slowly as I came in. And that blood stop is going to be like a dam that's opening. It's going to flush down the leg, flush the joints. So I bring the knee up towards center. I give a lot of support. And now that the hip has been opened, it wants a counter pose, like in yoga. We want to give a little bit of a twist. So I'm going to kneel perpendicular to the body so that I'm facing my hara, my center, towards his. I bring his knee just slightly across the midline, and then I'm going to fix right at the top of the hip here, right at the connection between the thigh and the hip bone. So not on the hip bone, but just a little bit lower on the thigh. And I fix with one hand, and then I stretch the line that runs on the outer thigh with my left hand by leaning forward. So I fix with this arm, lock, and then stretch. And I'm stretching the gallbladder channel, what we would call the TFL, or the tensor fasciae lata. And this will be a nice twist and counter pose to the hip opening. Yes? Good. And I can have a seat here, and we'll do a nice technique to stretch the psoas. So my receiver's foot is in line with his opposite knee. That gives me a good fulcrum. I interlace my hands around the knee, and then I'm just going to, with straight arms, lean back. And as I lean back, we're going to get a lift right here and a stretch. And when I come to a point of, you might say, the limit of the stretch, I add a little pulse. We call this the harmonic technique from osteopathy. And it's a little bit like rocking the body to release tension. If you look at his head, his neck, that rocking goes all the way up the back of the skull and connects to his neck. So what we do here, we touch the whole body with. As I release, what I'm going to use is my big toe and that knuckle right about there. And I'm going to look for the divot at the low back that we would sometimes call the dimple of the low back, which is close to the psoas. And I'm going to pull back and at the same time just give a gentle pulse with my foot. Try not to fall asleep. I know, watching massage, it's basically like a really good remedy for insomnia. I'll release here and then shake it out. Okay, coming back upright, I have the knee supported with my hand. I'm going to step my left leg across. And here, rather than supporting the knee crease with my thigh, I'm going to support more closer to his ankle and then place this same foot, my left foot, just outside that leg here. And as I step across, 1, 2, I want to lock my heel against basically where the femur and the hip connect. That crease I want to lock in. And I use my Achilles heel here. I lock back with my foot pointing towards his shoulder, so parallel to his torso. I'm going to slowly lean forward, and as I do, my Achilles heel is going to press against his quad at the top of the quad. We call this rectus femoris. One thing to be mindful of when you do this is your hip bone is going to be touching the outer ankle of your partner, so just be mindful of how much pressure there is. Make adjustments as necessary. And then really you can play with this one. You can lean and use the body weight and your ankle as a lever. Same technique, but this time we turn the foot out 45 degrees, and I'll use my heel instead. And so I walk my hands out at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to lock my foot back, and then shift my weight onto the ball of my foot, and now I can make little circles. And you can see it's very easy for me, almost no effort. And again, I'm being mindful of how much pressure there is here. So one of the tips, if you want to work on this one, is make sure you have a good lock with your foot locking back. And if this one is a little bit tricky, try this. Use this one leg in Happy Baby. Use the same side leg, lock with the back of your leg, and just play like that. See if you can find that lock. And that would be another way to feel it. Would be a nice technique as well. A little bit different. So, we're here. Lock, go, and then come back. And then we're going to do another fulcrum technique. So I'm going to bring my partner's body into a twist, and then I'm going to get my thigh flush just underneath his sacrum. So I should say actually the hip crest, just underneath the hip crest. And I would like to leverage right on the sacroiliac joint towards the tailbone. So what I'm aiming for is kind of the butt muscle. And I'm going to bring his knee towards me. And hopefully, the fulcrum point where my knee is that point between his tailbone, sacrum, and his femur, the head of his femur bone. So to make little adjustments here, I can support the shin with my left arm, cradle his ankle into my elbow crease, use my hand to the inner knee. That gives generous support. And then I place my knee where I think it goes, and I test it. I lean back, and I see if I have a fulcrum to lift the opposite hip. Some people, this is too much to just lean back, too much. So what I can do, reach with my opposite hand, hook around the hip, and come along for the ride. Otherwise, if they're happy and this is a welcome movement, you can just lean back. Very little effort. Excellent technique. So far so good? Happy? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's make sure we're on track. Yes, I think so. So now we're going to take our friend into sideline. We'll switch legs. We can use our tie pillow over here. In our case, it's a blanket. So just because I worked on one side and not the other, when I switch sides, what I will typically do is traction the opposite leg to create a little bit of space. So we've created all this space in the left hip, and we just begin by creating a little bit of space in his right hip. Okay? I would do a resume. When we practice, we will do both sides, but for now, I'm going to go right into the next technique. So we would have done all of those techniques on the second side, come back to the first side, bring our partner now into sideline. My favorite way is to bring both knees on the ground and use the lever of his long arm to bring him to sideline position. So here, I'm going to use my thigh as a wall, as a brace, to keep his hips stacked. And my thigh is pressing more or less on the hip crest, the bone, and that'll help us keep his hips stacked. We're going to be working with the technique to release the glute medius, which again is close to this juncture of the femur and the hip on the side of the hip. So in order to find this spot, what I'm going to do is open the joint a little bit and just palpate. And then as I close the joint, it shortens the muscle. So opening the joint, I look, I feel, I'm feeling for a pretty tenuous membrane here, this strong muscle. And then I find it and I let my body weight sink into my thumb as I allow the the hip joint to close a little bit, and that shortens that muscle and helps me to sink a little bit deeper. So the more upright you can be here, the better. A nice plumb line shooting straight down, and just be patient with it. Very nice technique here. Palm on thumb, so you can place your thumb right in your carpal tunnel. And so you find the spot with your thumb, add the palm, and now my palm is actually applying the body weight, and my thumb is just finding a more precise spot. I know, thrilling, isn't it? Just captivating. I can see you guys falling off your seat with enthusiasm. How's that feel, Mendel? Good. So we'll practice this one. Requires a little bit of precision, but with practice, you can get there. I'm going to pivot into the archer position, so I'm sitting on my left heel. I've still got the support of his leg, and I'm just going to give him a little bit of stretch here. So now that we've worked on this area, this muscle, we're just going to stretch it out a little bit. Keeping him in sideline position, I'm going to use my right arm to cradle, like we did before, the shin. So I use my elbow crease to support his ankle, my right hand to his inner knee. And then I keep him right here and start to reorient myself. So I want to get to a place where I'm almost facing his leg. And I'm using this arm to help create a fulcrum at the back of his thigh, where the thigh meets the glute. And now you can do this with your hand and provide a gentle stretch here. So I'm leaning back through my right arm, fixing with my left hand. First I fix, then I lean. And ideally, the hips stay stacked and the body doesn't turn very much. So sometimes you might need to reorient your partner if they start collapsing forward or back. But here, we've got a pretty good position. And if I'm happy here, I use my left knee. I find that same spot. And I think I want to keep his leg more or less parallel to the floor. And then I fix with my knee and lean back, and it's a big stretch. Readjust. And the leverage here is through fixing the knee and leaning back. One of the concerns that we might have is compression in the low back. So as you push, you want to push at an angle perpendicular to the thigh and almost towards the extended leg on the floor. And what that will do is it'll create some lengthening of the spine at the low back while you bring the back into extension. To bring him back to neutral, very easy. You just bring the knee in towards their chest and they roll back. And then we do the other side. And then we flip them to prone position. So, to bring my friend to prone, this is what I was talking about earlier as far as how you set up your partner. If you don't want them to have to move, but you can move them, you simply drag them to one side. And then when we roll Mendel over, he'll be more or less in the center. So even here I can use this same technique to roll him over. Okay. So in prone position, so again we would probably do those techniques on both sides before we roll over, if you were doing this as a part of a sequence. And then we'll just align the body so it feels good. And let's see. We'll work on this side so the camera angle is good. So I'll lift up his foot, widen his knee slightly, and I'm going to make a figure 4. So I bring his foot towards his opposite knee crease. And you can see this windshield wiper action like this. What's happening is the head of the femur bone is going to poke out here where the butt is, the glute. And so I'm going to fix my hand on that point, press down, and as I do, the movement will move the leg back to neutral or back to vertical. So I expose where I want to press, and I try to find that femur bone at the head of it and depress it as I allow the foot and the leg to come back up. And when you get into this, when you get happy with it, this can be like a stirring with that foot. It'll make a little circle, and it can be more of a dynamic technique. So we would say if you did some static techniques where you're just holding, sinking body weight, dynamic techniques like this can be very nice to move energy and to balance out your treatment. And you can see I'm quite comfortable here. My palm is turned out. I'm using the heel of my hand. And if I wanted to get even more comfortable, I'd get more perpendicular to his body so that this angle of my arm pressing on the glute it's just easier for me. It's more body weight. like that. Good. We're going to keep the figure 4. And now I want to make sure that his head is turned in the direction that it is, which is perfect. I can stretch his top arm alongside his ear. That'll make him more comfortable. A little bit of a fancy move here. So I'll show it from both sides. So similarly, I have the foot across the knee crease. And so if I use my left foot and I just held him here, I'm going to place the inner edge of my foot against his thigh. Like that. Quite simple. I want to do the same thing, 180 degrees, flipped around, so that I'm on his outer thigh. So my foot will be right here. So I place my foot there, outside his thigh. I reach under my leg, catch his foot, and then my opposite hand can reach for his knee, and that supports his knee, brings him into what we call Jack Scissors, from our friend Jack in Thailand, who's taught me quite a bit of Thai massage. And so my calf is above his knee, and my foot is just slightly above his knee. And in this position, you can see the leverage is bringing him into a twist and a sort of a lengthening of the body. So I use my hands, one at the mid-back, one close to the hip, and I just lean my weight and palm along the spine. It's a big stretch already, so you don't have to get fancy with it. I think it's another wonderful dynamic technique. Creates a great twist that moves up into the thoracic spine. And it's also a good stretch for this side of the body, the front side of the body, the belly. To come out, you come back to a kneeling position, and your feet can cradle the foot of your partner like this. And it's quite a fantastic, fun way to dismount. So, just so we can see, this one's probably one of the more technical, specific, and also fun skills that is in this sequence. We're going to look at it from both sides for your video. There we go. So again, the movement of the hands is palming along the spine, and a little bit also on the hip. So again, figure 4, I widen the knee, I bring the foot across the midline. In that figure 4 shape, I use my front foot, so I'm in half kneeling position. I use my front foot, in this case my right foot, flush along the outer thigh. I catch underneath. I support the knee with my opposite hand, and I bring him into this position with his knee just below my calf. So my leg is above his knee on this top leg, and then I use that to create this lovely movement. Is that okay on this leg? Yep. Good. And I'm following the movement, so as I lean, I'm leaning with my hips forward as well. And then once again, as I come down, I lower my right knee to the floor. I catch his leg with both my feet, and then use that to make it very graceful, lots of contact. And then we can do a variety of things. We can sweat on our partner. They always appreciate that. We can also bring them to child's pose. So place your hands under your shoulders. Press your hips back, knees wide, toes together. And this would be a nice way to finish this little sequence.